an earthen mound on the sun-baked plains of Africa. Inside, a clutch of leathery eggs belonging to the black mamba, one of the fastest, most aggressive, and deadliest snakes on the planet. A single bite contains enough neurotoxic venom to kill 10 grown men. But on this day, when these eggs hatched, what emerged was not a serpent. It was something impossible, something that defied the laws of nature. This is the story of a vacation that became a crime scene, a nature documentary that became a hunt for a saboteur, and the unbelievable footage that exposed a dark conspiracy hidden in the heart of the wild. It began with Dan, an amateur videographer with a passion for storytelling and a brand new camera. To build his portfolio, he planned the trip of a lifetime, a multi-day trek through a sprawling nature reserve in southern Africa. But he knew ambition wasn't enough to survive out here. He needed an expert. That expert was Ku, a local guide whose family had walked these lands for generations. He could read the wind, track a leopard by a bent blade of grass, and tell the difference between a warning call and a dinner bell. Dan brought the ambition, Ku brought the wisdom. Neither man had any idea that their simple documentary was about to collide with a secret that would put both their lives in danger. For days, their routine was simple: rise with the sun, film the breathtaking landscape, and capture the quiet majesty of the reserve's inhabitants. Then came the third afternoon. They were searching for a new subject when Ku, walking several paces ahead, stopped dead in his tracks. His body went rigid.
Ku, said Dan, stop! Don't move a muscle.
Dan, absorbed in his viewfinder, looked up, annoyed at the interruption.
What is it?
Ku said. He didn't turn around. He just said, "Look down. To your left." Dan lowered his gaze. Not 3 feet from his boot, nestled in a shallow depression, was a clutch of off-white, oblong eggs. He'd almost crushed them. Intrigued, he raised his camera to get a shot.
Ku replied, I wouldn't. That's a mamba's nest.
The words hung in the hot, still air. Dan felt his blood run cold.
Mamba?
He whispered, the name itself sounding venomous.
Ku. That's bad, right?
Ku finally turned, his eyes scanning the surrounding grass, not the nest.
It's the last thing you want to see, he said, his voice flat with tension. The mother is never far. Back away, slowly.
Dan shuffled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. Yet, even as fear prickled his skin, the filmmaker in him took over. The eggs were close to hatching. Ku could see the faint movements inside. This was a once-in-a-lifetime shot.
We can't just sit here and wait for it,
Dan said, his mind racing. He unhooked a small secondary camera from his pack, mounted it on a miniature tripod, and carefully crept forward. He camouflaged it in a tuft of grass, aimed it at the nest, and pressed record. It was a risky, impulsive decision, one that would change everything. Ku, though deeply uneasy, marked the location with a series of discreet notches on nearby trees. As they walked away, Dan could have sworn he heard a faint rustling in the grass behind them. The sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. They decided to retrieve the camera before returning to their main camp. Following Ku's marks, they navigated through the deepening twilight.
It was around here somewhere, right?
Dan asked. Yes, Ku confirmed, his own light joining the search. We are near. They found it. The nest was torn open, littered with the broken remnants of eggshells.
They've hatched,
Dan exclaimed, a rush of disappointment and excitement warring within him.
But where are the babies?
There were no tiny serpents. The nest was empty. Then Ku's flashlight beam froze.
Look there,
he whispered. Coiled a dozen yards away, a long, slate-gray shadow in the grass, was the mother mamba. She was watching them.
We have to be careful.
Ku warned.
They are fiercely territorial.
But something was wrong. Dan's light caught a strange detail around the nest. Not shed snakeskin, but tiny, downy feathers scattered by the breeze.
This is wrong,
Ku said, his voice laced with confusion.
all wrong.
The camera, Dan breathed.
We have to get the camera.
What followed was the longest minute of Dan's life. With the mamba's unblinking eyes fixed on him, he crept toward the hidden camera, his every synapse screaming at him to run. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the snake could hear it. He snatched the camera and retreated, backing away until he and Ku were swallowed by the darkness. Back at the safety of their camp, Dan plugged the camera into his laptop. He scrubbed through hours of footage, the sun arcing across the sky, the wind rustling the grass.
There, Ku said, pointing. The eggs were vibrating. Any moment now.
They watched, leaning in close. But what they saw made them recoil from the screen. The shells broke, but what emerged were not the sleek, scaled heads of baby mambas. They were small, wet, and covered in fledgling down.
They were chicks. What is this?
Dan asked, his voice a hoarse whisper.
Are those birds?
It was biologically impossible. A case of interspecies brood parasitism this extreme had never been documented. Dan felt a dizzying surge of adrenaline. This footage would make his career. But Ku, ever the pragmatist, knew something was fundamentally broken.
A snake doesn't adopt another animal's eggs,
Ku thought aloud, scanning the footage again.
Maybe something happened before they hatched.
Dan rewound the footage and increased the playback speed. The day flashed by in a blur. Sun, shadow, wind, and then a flicker. A dark shape, there and gone in an instant.
Whoa, did you see that?
Dan asked. Rewind.
Play it at normal speed.
They watched again, their eyes glued to the screen. As dusk fell in the recording, a figure emerged from the tall grass. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. The grainy, low-light footage showed the dark figure kneeling beside the nest. He opened a backpack and with surgical precision began swapping the mamba's eggs with another set from his bag.
Unbelievable,
Ku breathed, his confusion turning to cold fury.
Someone is switching the eggs. But why? The mamba will return and kill the chicks.
He looked at Dan, his eyes wide with a terrible realization.
This isn't a mystery of nature. This is a crime.
The next morning, they broke camp and made for the nearest ranger post. They walked for 2 hours, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. A cheerful ranger greeted them, but his smile vanished as Ku explained their findings.
Baby birds in a mamba's nest,
the ranger asked, skeptical. Dan didn't say a word. He just turned the laptop around and pressed play. The ranger watched, his face hardening into a mask of disbelief and anger. When the footage of the man swapping the eggs played, he slammed his fist on his desk.
I knew it,
he seethed.
We've had reports, strange animal behaviors, nests disturbed, but no proof. Without evidence, a story like this is just a madman's tale. He's trying to make us look incompetent. He will strike again,
Ku said. The ranger nodded grimly.
And we'll be ready for him.
His colleague Jabu was due back the next day, but this couldn't wait. A plan formed, desperate and bold. The ranger knew of another mamba nest, located in a rocky outcrop between their post and the site from the video. It was the perfect place to set a trap. As dusk fell, they reached the site. Dan, now an integral part of the operation, set up a new camera with a live feed, concealing it perfectly. The ranger and Ku established a hidden observation point nearby. Then, they waited. Hours crawled by. The symphony of the night was their only companion. Dan, his eyes burning from staring at the small screen, was about to suggest a shift change when he saw it. Movement. He's here, he whispered into his radio. A shadowy figure approached the nest, moving with a confident familiarity. They watched on the monitor as he knelt, placed his bag on the ground, and began the sickening ritual of switching the eggs. Now, the ranger commanded. They burst from their hiding places. The figure, caught in the beam of their flashlights, froze like a startled animal. As the ranger subdued him, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "I know you," the ranger said, his voice dripping with contempt. The saboteur was a man they had interviewed for a junior ranger position months earlier. The position had been cancelled due to budget cuts, and he had taken it as a personal insult. His plan was as twisted as it was cruel, to create a series of bizarre, unexplainable ecological incidents that would make the reserve staff look foolish and incapable, hoping one of them would be fired so he could take their place. The man was handed over to the authorities, but the story didn't end there. Dan's documentary, once a simple nature film, became a gripping true crime feature titled The Mamba's Deception. It went viral, exposing the fragile line between conservation and human corruption. The revenue from the film was more than Dan had ever dreamed of, but instead of keeping it, he used it to establish a new foundation, the Coup and Rangers Conservation Grant, dedicated to funding under-resourced ranger posts and supporting the unsung heroes who protect our planet's wild places. Dan, the amateur videographer, had set out to capture the beauty of nature. In the end, he captured something far more important, the truth. And in doing so, he proved that sometimes the most dangerous predator in the wild is not the one with fangs, but the one with a grudge.